Hello everyone. Today I'd like for you to use your imagination. Picture yourself coming home from vacation, you walk into your lab and everything is covered in mold. Well, that's exactly what happened to Dr. Fleming September 28, 1928. When he returned home from vacation and discovered all the mold growing in his lab, well, he didn't clean it like I probably would do. He examined this mold to see what it was doing to the bacteria that he had growing in the petri dish underneath. What it was doing was encapsulating this bacteria, preventing it from dividing and spreading and growing. Well, this was intriguing for him because he knew that if he could control the bacteria, he could prevent infection that was running rampant in that day and age. However, Dr. Fleming didn't have a strong background in pathology, the study of the disease. So he didn't have the resources also to develop and research the antibiotic to produce it. So he wrote articles on it, and they were published in journals, the British Journal of Medicine. And then it sat to the wayside for about 14 years until a Dr. Howard Florey found these articles and read about them. Well, he had the means, he had the money, he had the laboratory and people working for him to do the research to create this antibiotic. So they took on the project. They withdrew serum from the mold and created an antibiotic that they could give. They researched and used mice as their test animals, and they would expose them to an infection. They would give 25 of the antibiotic and 25 they wouldn't. 25 that received the antibiotic would live, and the other 25 would perish. So this was very intriguing for them. In 1940, they actually had their first patient that received the antibiotic. It was a Dr. Albert Alexander. He was a 48-year police officer who had got a scratch from a rose bush. And this scratch had led to an infection that spread to his eye and his face and into his bloodstream. Dr. Floyd convinced him to let him use this penicillin. They gave him the penicillin. He started to make a recovery. However, they only had enough penicillin for 5 days. And after that 5 days, they stopped giving him penicillin. His infection returned, only it returned worse. He ended up dying from this infection. So they went back to the lab. They were growing penicillin on everything, including bedpans. So whenever life gives you mold, make penicillin. That was their motto in those days. They had penicillin growing on everything. One of the assistants, Mary Hunt, she had brought in a cantaloupe, and it sit around for days in the lab. It grew a golden mold on it. Well, the mold it grew on it, they researched it and discovered it was 200 times more aggressive, growing to where they could produce the penicillin that much more rapid. So that was a great help in the production. So it was shortly after that, in 1942, they had their first success. A patient by the name of Ann Miller, she was in New Haven, Connecticut hospital where she had received she had had a miscarriage. She had an infection from it that was in her bloodstream. Her temperature was over 107 and she was delirious. They gave her the penicillin. She started within 24 hours of receiving the first dose. Her temperature had dropped, broke and dropped. Her orientation came back. She knew where she was, what was going on with her. She finished up the course of the antibiotic for 10 days and made a full recovery. So that was a very significant step in the discovery of the penicillin, which was wonderful because shortly after that, World War II started up. Well, in World War I, the infection rate was 18%. In World War II, it dropped to 1%. They gave this antibiotic to patients anytime they had any kind of a illness, any kind of exposure, any type of a injury. If their soldiers were injured, they a lot of times had to wait 14 days before they could get to surgery. So they developed gangrene and ended up losing the part. So all your soldiers would come home from war with injuries that would lead to life-altering changes. I'm not saying that didn't happen in World War II to where they had amputations, but it reduced it drastically. So it became known as the Red Letter Day, the day that Dr. Fleming discovered penicillin, to where it enabled the soldiers to come home from war. It saved their lives. And they earned the Nobel Prize for discovering it, Dr. Fleming as well as Dr. Florey. And the United States also started the development of giving this antibiotic and preventing disease from spreading. They established health departments in the United States because all the people were coming into tight-fit areas in the city, and it was causing disease to spread. So they used the antibiotic. They had controls for spreading disease, controlled water supplies. They controlled our food sources, and just maintain, set some standards of what the health departments did in those days. Um, and that led to controlling disease spread in the United States. Now, what I want to leave you with today is the thought that Dr. Fleming, when he discovered this antibiotic, warned us that if we overuse it, it could lead to resistance. Well, what the antibiotic does is it recognizes the penicillin, this bacteria, it recognizes this antibiotic and creates a memory of it. So when next time you get exposed, it will close the door and will not absorb this antibiotic. So that's what's happening in our society today. We've used so much of this penicillin that a lot of the bacteria and the microbes are becoming resistant to it. So we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and create some other type of a mold or some antibiotic that will fight off these infections. Thank you very much, and I hope this has been informative for you.